So now we're going to be talking about how we screen our tenants, and we've just talked about how making a relationship with partner agencies is so important when it comes to the whole of social property investment, but when it comes to picking, selecting, finding anything to do with your applicants and tenants, it's even more so important. And this is what we're going to chat about here, is looking at how partner agencies can help us to tenant properties. And this is one of my favourite ways of providing tenants and finding occupants for social property investment housing projects. It's working with partner agencies in the public and third sectors who can help us to get to know our residents better. They can help us to have a greater understanding of the social needs that may come connected to each individual, and they may be able to help with signposting to other organisations. They may be able to help with support and aftercare services. So they may help with the resettlement and adjustment period of a tenant moving in. They may help with more longer term support. They may direct to partner agencies that they work with and bring in some of their friends and supporters and other agencies that they know to work with tenants on their behalf, or bring in specialists who are more qualified or work in particular areas that they don't particularly work within. So working with and obtaining a good partner agency is your link into all of these other services and all of these other benefits of working in a consortium. And if you were able to get into a consortium with a partner agency who, it might be a charitable organisation who are supporting maybe rough sleepers on the streets, and they may be able to provide you with not just all of those support and aftercare and practical operational bits of help that you might need. They also could help you from the very beginning, before you've even found a tenant or thought of finding a tenant. They may already have a tenant on their books that is perfect for you, and and if you have a good relationship with them, they will let you know about them very quickly, and they'll keep you at a full occupancy. So it's really, really great to work with these partner agencies. And one of the best things is, I'm talking about this first because it leads on quite nicely from the other video. When we look at screening our tenants for social property investment projects, we can't look at using the same kind of methods as we would do if we were a traditional letting agent working with working professional tenants. Obviously, we know that a lot of our tenants in social property investment projects won't pass credit checks, and we know that we quite expect and we're quite comfortable with the fact that they are claiming benefits, and they may have issues with different social issues to encounter and to overcome. So we know that, and we're quite happy with that, but we still have to protect our risk. And so we still need to have a look into the background of a tenant and have a look at their particular circumstances to see whether they are going to fit the bill and they are going to meet the criteria and the needs of the particular solution that you are providing. And not every tenant will do. So it's important to do thorough screening processes on a tenant. And one of the best ways you can do that is by utilising the skill set of your partner agency and asking them to support you with your screening processes. So I'm asking a partner agency to send me as much information that they can do about that particular individual, and they'd be doing that with the tenant's permission. Everything, obviously, with data protection, we have to have our tenant's permission to share information. And your tenant should be aware of the fact that you're asking for information to be shared so that you can put the correct measures in place for them and make sure that they are moving into a solution which is going to be sustainable for them and it's going to be right for them as well. So as long as you're clear about why you need the information, then you should be okay to get this information. And as I say, keep a close relationship with the partner agency, and you will get to know each other very, very well. And your partner agency will know the type of tenants that you like, and they may know the type of tenants that you already have in your properties when they introduce new ones. And they may already know those tenants personally, and they know whether your original housemates will create a good relationship with this potential new housemate. So partner agencies can be great in terms of getting additional information that we might not always be privy to, and helping us to fathom out a little bit more about a tenant's particular circumstances, their support and care needs, whether all of their health and well-being needs are being met, whether they're in a good financial situation, or whether they need some more support with that. So we can find out all of the answers to all of these questions with our partner agency. And if they are able to, you can ask them if they can. They won't always be able to, but they may be able to send you copies of application forms and written documentation. And this might show you other potential members of your consortium. So there may be a social worker involved, or a drug and alcohol agency involved, or a solicitor, maybe having some mediation, so there may be a mediator involved, or maybe seeing a psychologist. So if you're able to get to see this information, then you can help to connect with these agencies and bring them in and let them know that you're providing a housing solution for this person, because that really will be the core of everything else they're doing. If they don't have the housing, they're not going to progress in any of the other areas that they may be working on. So housing is so important. So it's important to get involved and share information. And I'll be encouraging partner agencies who are working in social property investment strategies to share relevant information with accommodation owners and management agents, so that the right kind of care can be put in place when people move. So another couple of ways of screening our applicants that I want to talk about. The first thing really you should do, aside from your partner agency, so you may have decided you're not working with a partner agency, you may be adapting the strategy and going it in a different way. So you may just need to get your tenant from, as I mentioned earlier, from one of the different means, and you may have to start from scratch with screening and finding out about them. So if that's the case, I advise you to take a benefit check with your tenant, and you can do this on Entitled To, which is a website which goes through all your tenant circumstances, and it looks at all the different aspects of housing and work and employment, sickness and income and savings, and it looks at everything. And if you go through this with your tenant, and you can get an understanding of their particular circumstances, and you can also make sure that they're going to be eligible for the local housing allowance or the universal credit, and you can see which one they're most likely to get and the sort of rates that they'll be entitled to as well. So it's a really important part of your screening process that you undertake this check, because ultimately you need to know that this tenant is going to meet the allowance that is set for your property. So benefit check at Entitled To, first step in proceedings. The second step that we move on to is documentation, and I always ask tenants to bring all their documents when they come to a viewing, everything they can get their hands on, and we have a really good rummage through everything, and take copies of things if you're self-managing and you've not got an agent to manage for you, and you need to take copies of any of these documents. Make sure that you are protected with confidentiality and data protection in terms of the documents that you store, and you store them properly. Make sure you're not photocopying and storing anything personal, and do take care of that, because there are laws involved with looking at sensitive data. But it can give us a really good indication of a tenant's circumstances and history, and it can help us to build a little bit of a picture of a timeline of how a tenant has been managing their life over the last few years. And that's not to say that we would discount a tenant by finding any of this information out. As I say, a lot of these checks are done to identify if there are any issues that we can signpost towards supportive services. So say, are looking at tenants' bank statements and we can see that they're consistently going overdrawn in their bank, then that might be quite easy to resolve by referring them to a local credit union who can help them to look at opening a ring-fenced bank account for their benefits, and they can look at managing their money and budgeting better. So, as I say, looking through documentation can help you to address any problems, but it can also help you to find the solutions too. And it should never, and none of these checks should automatically enable you to discount a person, but it should, as I say, when they're combined together, help you to build up an overall picture of whether that tenant is going to be the right kind of tenant for you personally. So, moving on to the next thing is application form, and this is quite personal to you, and you can design your own application form. And I will put some different styles of questions coming in through the video, and you can ask really what you want in your application form within reason, but you can ask different questions, and I like to be quite creative. I'm not really interested in boring answers to questions, so I want to know things like, what kind of housemate are you, what are your strengths and weaknesses, what's your favourite thing to do on a Saturday. I want to know interesting things about my tenant, and I want to know what kind of person they are. I'm not as interested in the practicalities of things when I'm doing an application form, although it is important to get things like previous work history, copies of things like the national insurance number, all of those relevant details should be going on to your application form. But as I said, don't be rigid and ask fun questions too, and let your tenant show you their personality, and have some really fun answers to some of those questions. And it's a great way to build rapport with a tenant and get a bit of a laugh out of them, and they can see that you're a human being, and you want to get to know them as well. You're not just a landlord who's there to sign over a room. So it's a good way to build rapport by asking some more out there questions. Now, social media is a fun one. Social media is probably the bane of all tenants' lives now, because we can all check social media and see whether the tenants are partying or whether they have dogs or cats or 17 friends sleeping over every night. So lots of my tenants have added me on social media, and I found out all kinds of things by being friends with them. Fire engine coming to put out a fire one weekend was one. Cats running around the house, another thing I found out on social media. So it's not suggesting that you always add your tenants on social media. Obviously, I'm in a little bit of a different situation than a normal landlord or managing agent. However, social media is a really great place just to check on your tenants and check their online profile and their history, and just to find out a little bit more about them as a person. And I think it's commonly used in referencing now with employment and across the board, really, that social media and people will type names into Google, and you can find out quite interesting things when you do that. One example for me on the pilot scheme was when I typed somebody's name into Google, I found out that they had been released from prison for a very, very serious crime only quite soon before that. And that was something that had slipped through the net from any partner agencies. So if I hadn't done that Google search, I would have ended up with potentially a very difficult situation in a multi-let environment. It was a potentially dangerous criminal. So I would say check social media and Google, and see, as I say, a little extra just to see if there's anything that comes up there that could be a potential issue at all. References. I love doing references because my tenants are always really creative about where they get them from, and not a lot of references. Obviously, when you work with homeless and rough sleepers, a lot of the people that you're working with just don't have references, and they don't have professional references. So I say go and get what you can. If you can get college, school, an old employer, somebody that knows you of professional standing in any way. If worse comes to worse, get us character references from neighbours, housemates, people that know you, anywhere you might have done voluntary work for. And I had a lovely guy who's one of my best tenants, favourite tenants, who ended up being employed by the landlord. And he went and he didn't have any professional references, but he got a letter of recommendation from every neighbour on his mum's street. And I ended up with about 20 letters. I cried when I was reading through them, of how amazing this guy had been. And he'd helped all of these neighbours in different ways over the course of the years. And we let him move into the property. He didn't meet all of the criteria, but we thought that he seems like an amazing guy, and all these people vouched for him. So we went off these character references, and it paid off for us, because he ended up doing really, really well. The landlord actually ended up employing him for a short time. So it worked out well for everybody. So as I say, be creative, ask for references, and don't be too rigid, because you can find out some gold information, and you can find out lots about a person's character, and whether they will make a good tenant with support. Whether they have a good heart. You can find that out sometimes by character referencing. So the another thing I want to just mention before moving on to the next part is contributory payments. And this is a good way of referencing. I try not to put barriers in front of tenants with social property investment projects. So in terms of fees and working with deposits and rent in advance, I try to remove as many barriers as I can. Now, contributory payment helps a tenant to feel a sense of ownership of a property. So, excuse me, if they are paying a nominal amount, say £50 towards their property, it's better than just moving in and not paying anything and having no sense of value or ownership there, which is something that we encountered with tenants on the pilot scheme who didn't pay up front towards their properties. They tended to respect their properties less. They tended to treat them less well, tended to be more rent arrears, more damage, more tenant disputes. So we found a contributory payment was a good way to create some ownership, and to have a person feel like they really owned a part of this property, and they really had something of value, and they had respect for the property. So it can be easy for a person to achieve this if they say are sleeping on the streets. At first I used to think, oh gosh, how are they going to find this money? And there are lots and lots of supporting partner agencies which will help a person financially with a small sum when they need it to move into accommodation. So for example, in Manchester, we have something called the Big Change campaign, which is a fund of money, a pot of money, which is it's quite a large pot of money, which is there to support the homeless when they're moving into privately rented homes. So if your tenant is being asked to pay a small contribution to moving in, it shows to me how proactive they are in going to look for that fund. If they will carry on to be proactive as a tenant. So if a tenant goes out their way, if they say you've got to find this £50 fund, and they spend all day traipsing all over Manchester and eventually go to the Big Change campaign, and they say, oh, we can't help you, and the tenant comes back and says, oh, I've done this and I've been to Big Change and they can't help me, I'm going to say, do you know what, let me call Big Change and I'll see if I can help you. And if worse comes to worse, I'll waive the fee. But the point of the matter is that tenant has demonstrated that they are very driven towards obtaining the property, and they're willing to go out there and obtain the resources they need. So it shows me that they're proactive, and it also shows me that they are willing to engage. So it shows me that they are willing to go and work with these partner agencies if they need to be, or if they're directed to do that. So it's really, really important, and it shows me, as I say, it's not about the money as such, it's about showing that person is going to continue to be this type of tenant. So if a tenant comes to me and says, oh, I haven't got the £50 around and say, well, you know, there's a couple of places that do, and why don't you try here and try here? And if they can't be bothered to go away and investigate, or if they can't, if they come back and say, oh, I've not even looked, I've still not got it, can you not waiver it? You know, no, you have to give something to get something in return. And this is about building responsibility and getting tenants and getting those who are, you know, chronically homeless, so rough sleeping, those who are, you know, really struggling. It's about getting them to get a sense of self-esteem again and say, I did that. I got myself out of that shit situation. You know, I trekked across Manchester and I got my deposit and I got my flat and I made the call to social property investment and I did, you know, it's about so much more than just money. And that's a really, really important part of the screening process. And I know this might be implicated because we're not able to charge fees as letting agents. This is being rolled out now in the future, so you may need to be creative as to how you implicate that. In terms of anything over a small payment, £50 to £100, I would say you are restricting your marketplace then. So if you say, we're going to offer this solution, but we want a £500 deposit up front, there are very, 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 very few people who want to move into these types of projects that have access to those types of funds up front. If we refer back to previous parts of the workshop and the training, when we looked at the amount of benefits and the actual rates of benefits, we can see that, you know, for an individual to save up, say £500, that's a huge sum of money when you're only earning maybe £70 a week. So don't restrict your marketplace by putting huge fees there, but do understand the importance of placing fees there and little challenges and obstacles almost, and that will help your tenant to become more independent, more responsible, and more focused on completing tasks that they may be responsible for in the future. So think of this this is a first task of many that they'll have to complete, because they're going to be more motivated to go and get that £50 to move into the property than they are to go down to the housing benefits office if there's a problem with their claim. So the level of motivation they show you to go and obtain the resources they need to get into a property, and that goes for referencing, goes for getting, as I say, little move-in fees, the level of commitment that's shown. You should take that as a benchmark for the level of commitment that's going to be shown throughout, and don't expect that you know, that may waver too. So if you are thinking of taking on a tenant that doesn't look super committed to you at the screening stage, then I would say that tenant probably not going to be right for the project, because they're not going to want to engage with the right with the level of support that's going to be on offer and is hopefully going to be accessed by the whole consortium. So the last thing I want to say about screening really is follow your intuition and always go with your gut feeling on screening tenants. I didn't do this a couple of times and it really ended up biting me in the back. We had a tenant that I really took pity on, who had some mental health issues, and my gut feeling said no, but I didn't want him to spend another night on the streets. And unfortunately he had a psychotic breakdown and attacked another tenant, and that was something that really upset me for a long time afterwards. And so it's so important to make sure that you're going through screening processes properly, and also follow your gut instinct too. So somebody may look perfect on paper and they may tick every single box, but something just doesn't sit right. Don't go with it. You know, there are plenty more fish in the sea. We have something like 5 million claimants of LHA in the private sector, so we can find one or two that are going to be great tenants, I'm sure. So if you find one and your gut instinct doesn't sit right, move on to the next one, be polite and and let them down gently, but move on to the next one. So plenty more fish in the sea, and we'll move on next to see how we look at the selection of social property investment tenants. So how are we, once we've got all the information, how are we actually choosing them and how are we selecting who goes where?